All right. In this second lecture for the week, we're going to be discussing assertiveness, what it is, and how to most effectively communicate in an assertive manner. I'm hoping that all of you took a bit of time after the first lecture to evaluate, to kind of check in with yourself and how your relationships are going, um, and just to see if there is some aspect of your relationships that you might like to work with. In other words, an area of the relationships where you might want to consider setting a new boundary, or you might want to recreate or recraft one that you already have. And as we go through this particular lecture, um, hopefully you'll get some ideas about how to work with your messaging, how to actually communicate what it is that you may be wanting or wanting to stop. Okay, so assertiveness a lot of times gets referred to as the midpoint between passiveness and aggressiveness. And if you just look at this continuum, we have aggressiveness over on the right. And with aggressive communication, what is also happening is that we're disrespecting others. And over on the left, with passive communication, a lot of times we're actually disrespecting ourselves. And if we can hit this midpoint with our style of communication, if we can do this assertive kind of thing, what's happening is you're protecting your thoughts, ideas, and territories. And so, in other words, you're respecting yourself while also respecting other people's rights, feelings, and thoughts. So, as you can see, assertiveness really combines respect for self and respect for others. So, assertiveness is just, it's a communication style or a communication skill. And it's one that we definitely have to learn and practice. I suppose it is possible that some of you, or maybe a lot of you, um, had the experience of witnessing a lot of really high quality assertive communication when you were growing up, and you've been able to model that, and it's become a skill that maybe feels very natural to you. But kind of, I think I mentioned this in the last video. I think that for most of us, this is a skill that it takes time. It takes time to develop it. It takes time to maybe get comfortable with it. And for some of us, we're having to maybe learn to move away from being so passive and develop that courage to speak up. And for others, we might have developed a style of communication that was um, more aggressive, maybe a little more hostile, demanding. And so, I know a lot of times with students in class, there are different types of things going on, some needing to tone it down a notch, and some people really needing to work towards speaking up from a place of courage and strength. So I like this statement. It says, being assertive means being able to stand up for your own and other people's rights. But you're doing that in a calm and positive way without being either aggressive or passively accepting wrong. So, when you think about yourself, how you communicate maybe in general, what do you think your lean is right at this point? Do you lean towards assertiveness, or are you someone who's maybe leaning a little more towards passiveness or aggressiveness? Now, we've got some, just a bit of a description here under aggressiveness, passiveness, and assertiveness. And what you're also seeing on this slide is there's another communication style that's been slipped in, passive aggressive. Now, passive aggressive communication oftentimes gets seen as manipulative. So, and manipulative, that means trying to control somehow. And with passive aggressive communication, a couple of things that oftentimes show up is using guilt. So, trying to guilt someone into doing something or guilting someone to try to make them feel a certain way. And also, sarcasm tends to be a real hallmark of passive aggressive communication. Um, with these communication styles like aggressiveness, passiveness, and passive communication or passive aggressive communication, I think it's just important to really take this in. They don't work. Um, especially if what you're shooting for is honesty within a relationship or a relationship that's going to be healthy and enjoyable. So, so with aggressive communication, it often gets seen or perceived as demanding, coercing, controlling. Now, with passive communication, what the perception a lot of times will be is that the person who's communicating passively is dependent or weak. And then we talked about that perception with passive aggressiveness seen as manipulative. And then assertiveness, the perception is a lot of times just that the person is really direct. So here's a little more detail about what assertiveness actually involves. And I think this is a really good slide. Assertiveness is direct. The communication is clear. Um, Assertive communication is honest. It's also appropriate. I think it's really important to keep that in mind. When a person is communicating assertively, they're also going to look confident. The body language is confident, and the tone of voice is confident. So there's this other part of the presentation that involves what you're doing with your body, um, what your tone of voice sounds like, and then eye contact also is going to fall in there with body language. With assertive communication, eye contact is going to be present. Looking at the floor is going to be perceived as not as self-assured, a little weaker, more passive. So being able to establish eye contact. Also, with assertive communication, this is really key. Um, Many of the statements are going to begin with the word I. Assertive communication involves statements like I think, I feel, I want. If we lead out with that you are, or you make me, um, those you statements are going to come across as being more aggressive. And sometimes then what will happen is the other person becomes defensive. Um, you statements interrupt communication. It becomes harder for the other person to listen um, in an open type of way if we're, starting those sentences with you. So I statements are really important. So, the tone of voice with assertive communication, it is a confident tone of voice, but it's also, we mentioned on the previous slide that there is a firmness. There's a strength there with assertive communication. Um, so hopefully this helps. And I'm just going to read this. It says, being assertive is a core communication skill. Being assertive means that you express yourself effectively. So this is effective. It isn't about winning, and it isn't about being right. It's about effectively or clearly communicating your thoughts, your feelings, your desires, your needs. It's also a way that we actually stand up for ourselves, that we demonstrate that we respect ourselves. And again, the way we're communicating also is respecting the other person's rights, their beliefs, their feelings, their opinions. So we're not demeaning the other person. We're simply standing up for ourselves. And this last statement, it says, being assertive can also help you boost your self-esteem and earn others' respect. I bet that when you think about some of the people that you respect the most, that some of it may very well be related to how they communicate. Um, if they use the appropriate words, if they're communicating with confidence, if they're selecting the appropriate time and the appropriate environment. So, see, there's a lot to this when it comes to being assertive. And, we talked about self-esteem in the last lecture. And, becoming more assertive truly will help boost your sense of self-esteem, also your sense of self-respect. And I want to also include here self-worth, the feeling that you do actually have value. Okay, and some advantages. This is a pretty long list, and I'm just going to try to hit on some that maybe we haven't talked about. Um, this one, assertiveness minimizes or decreases the chance that you'll actually hurt others. Okay, we may think that by being passive and not speaking, that that's the best course of action. Sometimes it is because we don't necessarily have to speak up about everything that's on our minds. But when it is important and it's necessary to speak up, um, you know, an assertive style of communication, you're going to be able to pull that off without hurting others and without alienating them, without making them feel left out. Okay. And I think really with the rest of these, we've pretty much talked about it. But I wanted to mention this particular one because I think that fear of hurting others is sometimes a reason why we don't speak up. So, in other words, we get more concerned with the other person's feelings than maybe we are for our own. And with assertiveness, there's a real balancing of that. It's the way that you can respect yours and the other person's at the same time. Assertiveness is not mean. It's firm, it's confident, but it's not mean, it's not pointed. Now, along with increasing self-esteem, self-respect, self-worth, the other big benefit that you get from becoming more assertive is that feeling of being empowered. For a person who struggles a little bit more with being passive, While during that period of time where you just begin to practice this and begin to speak up more, I think a lot of people walk away from that and they almost feel like they've got a little hop in their step because it can feel so good to stand up for yourself, like you're in charge of your life again. And for people who have maybe struggled a little bit with getting aggressive with their style of communication, I think moving back into that area of assertiveness can actually result in you feeling really good about yourself, maybe even kind of proud of yourself. I really don't know of anyone who feels proud of themselves or truly good about themselves if they're communicating in a real aggressive way. Okay, so how do you do this? How do you actually start incorporating assertiveness into daily life? And these are some suggestions. And again, I would almost encourage you to look at this and maybe take it on as a little bit of a personal project. Maybe you could do just focus on one thing a day, one item a day. But these are some good ideas. And again, easier said than done. This takes practice. First idea is only say yes when you truly mean it. And that would be kind of interesting to track. How often do you actually say yes when you don't really want to be saying yes? So with assertiveness, only say yes when you truly mean it. Say no when doing so is in your best interest. So here are two opportunities to practice the yes and the no. Use I statements. For some of you, if this feels new, if it feels a little uncomfortable, maybe you could devote one day of the week to where you're just practicing I statements. So when there is a time where it feels important to speak up on behalf of yourself, um, just expressing, I don't like this, or I'm not willing to be a part of this, or I'm not interested in doing this right now. I appreciate your invitation. Or it could be asserting yourself in this whole other way, letting someone else know about a desire, a need, or a want. This last statement, I would like to be involved in. And, I've actually practiced using this a bit more, in the last few years, actually speaking up and letting other people know when there's something that I might want to be included in. So, I know for me, it's sometimes simply if I hear that other people have done something that, I would have really enjoyed, expressing, oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. I'd totally love to do that. If you're willing, please let me know last time. I'd really like to go. So, one of those types of statements. You might devote one day to actually working a bit with eye contact. That eye contact can really let other people know that, I feel equal to you. And also, working with body language. Again, the body language with assertiveness is confident. So, what I would recommend also is maybe getting in front of the mirror and watching yourself communicate, or videotaping yourself and watching yourself communicate. That would actually be kind of a cool assignment. I wish I'd thought of this earlier. I could have had you guys create an assertive statement and videotape yourself, and then, maybe do a bit of a critique or suggestions for improvement with regard to how you're communicating. So, what I'd like you to take a look at now is that situation, the relationship, whatever it may have been that you have maybe identified as being an area where you might like to establish a new type of boundary. And what I would recommend is that you write your script, that you actually write down exactly what you're going to say. And I'm not suggesting that you take the script with you. When you communicate this, you could, but I think writing something down can really help us get much clearer about how we want to do it. Um, so, you can think about this now, or you could pause the video and write your script down and then come back to this. But I'd like you to first consider, is the request that you're making, is it reasonable and appropriate? Okay, when it comes to appropriate, there are some areas in life that it might not be appropriate, like especially when you're looking at a hierarchy. In the workplace, we probably aren't going to ask our boss to do certain things. We might want to express our feelings or ask a question, but we're probably not going to say, I want you to start doing blah, 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 because that's maybe not an appropriate ask from an employee. Same rules could apply for if you're wanting to speak with your parents, especially if you're still living at home and they're financially supporting you, or if you're living at home and not paying rent. So we have to kind of consider, I think, to some degree, is there a hierarchy here in terms of position, or is it really appropriate for me to say this? Now, in those situations where there is a hierarchy, this doesn't mean you cannot speak up. Speaking up is important, but what we ask for and how we do it might change a bit. The other thing to really think about, once you have this script and you've decided what it is you want to say and how you plan to say it, how are you going to actually initiate this conversation? So, are you going to contact the person and say, hey, do you have time to talk? At 3 p.m. today, I'd really like to talk with you. Or how can you actually make this conversation happen? How are you going to initiate it? In a straightforward, direct way. How can you do that? Um, Also, I think these are important considerations. Where is the best place to have the conversation? What location do you want to have it? What is the best time to have the conversation? Um, if this is an important conversation and if you're really wanting to increase the chances of being heard, you know, timing can be really important. Wanting to talk to someone as soon as they walk in the door after a long day at work is probably not the best timing. So consider timing also. And then, after you've decided these things, double check your script. Are you using those I statements? Is there any part of your communication that could lead to them feeling defensive? Um, and if you think that's the case, is there an even better way that you could be expressing it? Um, have you been clear? We don't want to talk around the issue. We want to move toward that issue, be more direct. And, in your communication, are you respecting both people's rights, both people's feelings, both people's opinions? So, yeah. Now, after you've made these decisions and you've taken a really good look at that script again, it's time to do it. So this wasn't just about putting things down on paper, it's about being courageous and then taking that next step and giving it a try. It may go exactly as planned and it may not. But the only way we actually are able to develop this particular skill is to rally up and just give it a go. Um, and also remember, if you're being assertive in terms of asking for something, you have the right to do that. But at the same time, the other person gets to choose whether or not they want to cooperate, basically. So it's possible you won't get what you want, but you will get clarity. You'll get important information. So I always feel like this is worth it. Okay, so I'm just sitting here and realizing that it's very, very possible that this is the last stress management lecture that I will ever give. And that is a very weird feeling. So if you are on the other end of this still listening to me, I'd just like to say that it's been an honor to get to be your teacher this semester. And my only wish is that we would have remained face to face. I'm so thankful, though, with you guys, I got to know all of your names. And so when you're turning in assignments, turning in your labs, I'm able to see your face. And so that is something I am really thankful for. But I hope you enjoyed this lecture. And I hope it maybe felt motivating to get you to move on something, especially if it's something you've been thinking about for a while. And I look forward to seeing the remainder of your assignments turned in and your tests. And hopefully our paths will cross again. Take good care of yourself.